Hello, and welcome to the Homer Central School District Virtual Town Hall. Thank you for joining us virtually tonight. I am Luke Marinas, the Vice President of the Homer Board of Education. I will be gathering your questions and moderating tonight's forum. This is certainly an unusual time for our community, and we hope these 3 interactive sessions will get everyone's questions answered and that we can work together to make the best of an unprecedented situation. So how will this all work? A panel of school officials will answer questions previously submitted, and we will accept live questions via email as well. So how do you submit a question? You can submit a question via email, like I mentioned. The email address is homerschoolreopening@homercentral.org. That's homerschoolreopening@homercentral.org. Another way, and maybe an easier way, is to go to the school's website, homercentral.org, click on the red banner for reopening updates. There you'll find frequently asked questions and the email address to submit questions for tonight. Tonight's town hall will focus on instruction. We plan to have 3 topics over these 3 nights. So tonight is instruction, tomorrow will be health and safety, and Thursday night will highlight transportation and food service. We will try to stay on a given topic tonight for instruction, but some questions may overlap into other areas, but please tune in for all 3 nights if you can to cover all 3 subject areas. So with that, let's get on with the good stuff. Joining us tonight to answer our questions are Superintendent Tom Turk, Director of Instruction Ted Love, Director of Special Education Chris Moore, Director of Physical Education and Athletics Todd Lisi, Chief Information and Technology Officer Josh Finn, and special thanks to Board Clerk Kelly Jacobone, helping me out behind the scenes. So, thanks to the panel for being here to answer questions, thanks to the community for tuning in, and thanks to our support staff for putting all this together. With that, let's get started. Tom, before we get to the community questions, could you perhaps provide a brief update on the work that has brought us to today's forum and any updated information you can share since your last community video?
Sure, and welcome everyone. Again, important group of meetings that we'll have over the next 3 days. Our goal to give you all the information that you need to be comfortable with your learning model choice that you make for your children this year. A lot has happened in a nutshell, certainly since March. Unprecedented time, as Luke mentioned. We were in school one day, we were not in school the next, and everything in between has been a lot of hard work and dedication on the part of our staff. As we moved into the summertime, we identified a reopening planning team that had folks from the school and the community on that organizing team. From that team, we looked at the guidance that we received from the New York State Department of Health, from the CDC, from the New York State Education Department, and we formed subcommittees that started to study some of those things in more detail. One critical piece that we included in our reopening team was a survey that we sent out to our school families to get a general sense, before we really gave you any details about what our plan was, to find out what your comfort level was and what the reactions of your children had been since March, to try to help us in our planning. One of the things that came out loud and clear, and really which drove some of those decisions that are in our reopening plan, was the overwhelming desire to have kids return to some semblance of normalcy as much as they could. And that meant for a lot of people to have them in school. We really wanted to take a look, and we had to keep in mind some critical things as we built our plan. We had to look at our facilities and keep in mind the social distancing piece that we had to make sure was in place. We wanted to try to build a plan that limited students' exposure to one another, limited the movement throughout the day for those folks that were in person to the greatest extent possible. That the document that I shared with you on July 31st really does a nice job of outlining those things that were critical components to our plan. And I'll go down through those again just to reiterate those for people that might not have been here on our discussion on July the 31st. We have to make sure, in order to open our school, that we're ensuring educational equality, whether that means the student is with us here in our Homer buildings or at home. We have to provide daily teacher and student interaction. While we did a wonderful job from March to June, one of the things that we can certainly improve on is the amount of daily contact that we have with students. I mentioned the appropriate social distancing piece, and again, critical that we follow the guidelines that have been established as it relates to social distancing. We have to and have developed a process for our health checks and a daily screening that'll happen both for students and staff. I want to talk just for a minute because I know there have been a number of questions about what our face mask policy is. And in the document that we shared on July 31st, we did mention that we are going to require face coverings for both students and staff. But if you want to get even more nuanced, one of the things that we have in our guidelines is the requirement of face mask breaks. And our face mask break will take place while students are in the classroom, while instruction is going on, and while there's independent learning going on. It will not be a case where we will have a student walk into the class and take their mask off for the duration of that class. We are still in the development phase of the duration of time, but one of the things that we think is important is that it's consistent so that folks, when they send their kids to school, will understand what our expectation is, but also for staff, because we don't want to create situations where we have wildly different face mask expectations. So where we currently are with our face mask break requirement is 2 to 3 minutes for a 40-minute class period. For those students that are in pre-K to 6, we would have them be 5 to 6 minutes per hour. And that's where we are right now, but certainly as we continue to have more conversations with staff about those, we'll communicate that. But it will be an expectation that face masks are mandatory. Again, I think our children will do a nice job of wearing those, but we also want to make sure that we give them those breaks. As we're building our plan, we also have to make sure that we clean and disinfect our schools. And if you had a chance to take a look at our plan that's on our district website, you'll see that we have put those plans in place. And we want to do a good job of teaching our kids what is the expectation around healthy hygiene habits. So those were the critical components. And again, taking the feedback from the survey, when we put that out in the field earlier in the summer, we developed our learning models. So for our pre-K to 6 students, we have a couple of options, the in-person learning or home learning. We're not able to offer a hybrid at the younger grade levels, and for a couple of reasons, really. The first is that one of the survey results that jumped out at us the most was the overwhelming desire for people to have their kids back in school. Not to mention the fact that the guidelines that we received from New York State Ed asked us to prioritize our youngest learners, our ELL students, our English language learners, and our students with disabilities. For grades 7 through 12, we're offering a hybrid model. The hybrid meaning 2 days in school with a teacher and 3 days at home. We would have loved to have brought everybody back full-time every day, but we just don't have the space when we take into consideration our social distancing requirements. And then also grades 7 through 12 student could learn from home 5 days a week as well. So those were in an overview, those were the models that we developed and the reasoning and the things that we had to make sure were evident in our plan. I do want to give you a couple of updates, things that we have worked on and we have some movement on since I talked to you folks on July the 31st. We have identified that given the space requirements or space limitations and the social distancing requirements and the number of students that we have who are going to be coming in person, we are not going to be able to accommodate all of our K1 and 2 students at Homer Elementary School. So let me break it down for you. So we've talked before about our pre-K being at Homer High School in an area separate from the high school students. That will remain the same. Our kindergartners and our first graders will be at Homer Elementary School. Our 2nd through 5th graders will be at Homer Intermediate School. Our 6th through 8th graders at the junior high, and grades 9 through 12 at Homer High School. So that's the configuration, and again, more information will be coming out about that, but that is, when we were looking at our numbers last week, we identified that change needed to be made. The other update is that we also want to do a thoughtful job about bringing our students back to school. So we're going to do a general phase in, and we're going to prioritize those students that are new to their learning environments. So, and again, more information will be coming, so you won't have to commit this to memory right now. But one of the things that we will do on Tuesday, September 8th is prioritize our pre-K students who will be going to the high school, our kindergarten students that'll be new to Homer Elementary, our second and third graders that'll be new to Homer Intermediate School, our sixth graders who will be new to the junior high, and then because it's a hybrid model, A through L in ninth grade, we'll bring in our first cohort of ninth graders on Tuesday, September the 8th. All other students will begin learning from home on September the 8th. And again, we'll go through the day by day for that first week, but by the end of the first week, all of our students will be phased in and be in school. So starting on Monday, September the 14th, all of our students, given their chosen learning models, will be in school. And again, more information will come out about that. So those are updates that I have for you since the video that was sent out on July the 31st. And Luke, it looks like we're gonna go to some questions now.
Yes, thank you, Tom. The first one is likely for Director of Instruction, Ted Love. Ted, there have been a lot of questions about the home learning model and what families should be expecting for their student if they have selected that model. Could you add some detail and take some time to walk folks through that so they can better understand what the school day will look like?
Sure, absolutely, and thank you, Ms. Marinas, and good evening, Homer families. I'd like to start by highlighting some notable differences as we think about home learning and what both the home learning and hybrid learning models are going to look like when students are learning at home, because there will be some significant differences than how home learning was carried out in the March through June timeframe. Most notably, there are two aspects that I want to discuss with you this evening. The first is that as a school system, our teachers are going to be responsible for teaching our in-person and our home learners every day. And we may have some students that are moving in and out of home learning. Because of that, we will be teaching the same sequence to both the home learners and our in-person learners. We're asking every teacher team, for example, the first grade team or the earth science team of teachers, to teach the same topics in the same sequence. In addition, we've been working hard this summer to identify our priority standards. What that means is that our essential learning, right, the most important pieces that a child needs to be successful in the next course, in the next grade, will be ensured that all children, regardless of their modality of learning, have access to the same skills and concepts to prepare them. The second major difference between what we experienced this past spring and as we move towards the fall is that to ensure the quality of education for all students at home and in person, we'll be leveraging more real-time live instruction for our home learners. This is for several reasons. First, we want to create a sense of classroom community. And secondly, we want to ensure that all children get to interact with their classmates each day. In addition, our instructional expertise in K-12 education and pre-K through 12 education has been highly refined for in-school learning. And we want to make sure that all students have access to that expertise that our teachers have. In addition, technology does some things very well. However, the role of the teacher to motivate, encourage, coach, guide, and facilitate student learning will not be replaced by Chromebooks or iPads in home learning activities. We will be asking this school year for every teacher to connect with every student every day. So that is not only our in-person instruction, but our teachers at an elementary level, that would be the classroom teacher at the 7th through 12th grade level, or 6th through 12th grade, 7th through 12th grade level, but even 6th graders who have multiple teachers, those teachers will be reaching out to the home learners every day. So every child, the child should be receiving communication from that teacher. So to summarize, the biggest change for students and families is really that your child needs to be available during the defined instructional hours of the school day. We will not be expecting a child to be on a screen for 6 hours a day, though. It will be throughout different points throughout the school day that teachers will be identifying those opportunities for them to perhaps engage with the class in morning meeting, perhaps see a demonstration that's happening in a science class, or even just connecting for some class conversation and the teacher to check in on their learning. So we're looking at combining that in-person, real-time connections with students using the technology with some of the at-home learning activities that we saw this past spring. So that's the biggest difference.
Thank you so much. With that, let's get into some of the frequently asked questions. And I'll ask anyone on the panel to jump in to answer as it pertains to them. One of the questions, will children that do not have internet access or the appropriate technology, such as a Chromebook or an iPad, will those students be able to take part in home learning?
I'll be happy to answer that question. As Ted indicated, we are working very hard to reach kids when they're home. That while technology is not the end-all be-all, the teacher will be the one delivering instruction, technology will be the way that they get there. And as a district, we've acknowledged the fact that not everybody has the same access to both the equipment nor the connectivity that may be required to receive home instruction, whether that be because they've selected home instruction or because they're participating in the hybrid model. So what the district has done is we've identified the individuals who have the need for connectivity through our selection survey. And we will be providing them with wireless hotspots, whether that be Verizon or AT&T, to be able to accommodate that need. We will be looking at identifying students who have selected home learning in kindergarten through 6th grade to supply with those devices. And we will be looking at all individuals who have that need, grades 7 through 12, because they'll be doing the hybrid learning, potentially home 3 days a week. Additionally, in the fall, as Ted also, or the spring rather, as Ted also indicated, and Tom did too, as a matter of fact, we may have been caught a little flat-footed. The COVID kind of came through, and we were here on a Monday, and a Tuesday we were home, if I recall. And we did our best to accommodate those needs for equipment. We're a one-to-one district, and students in grades pre-K through 12 have access to a piece of equipment here. We did a good job of sending kids in grades 3 up with equipment and supplying their needs, but we weren't ready for getting the iPads home. In this fall, we've been able to identify a solution so that we can make sure that those youngest learners, our kindergartners and our first graders, have access to that equipment so that they can actually learn right along in lockstep with their classmates who are here in person. So I'm really excited about that work. We're looking forward to being able to roll that out and gain true equity through all the kids that have chosen different modalities throughout the district.
Thank you, Josh. Next question for the panel. My child is planning to attend a BOCES program during this school year while also attending Homer High School. Will the hybrid and/or home learning model allow for this?
Sure, I'll be happy to take that one, Luke. At this point, BOCES has announced that they will be offering their programming for 5 days per week. That's inclusive of both students who participate in the Career and Technical Education, or CTE programs, as well as students who may attend other programming located at any of our BOCES campuses. So Homer Schools will be facilitating and providing transportation, and that is for all students regardless of whether it is a day of attendance via their hybrid learning model selection.
Thanks, Chris. Moving on to the next question. If I selected to send my child back to school in person, but later decide to switch to home learning, how would that work? Would they switch to new teachers? Could we switch back again if we choose to later on?
Luke, I'd be happy to answer that one for you. So if your child begins the year in person and you wish to change to remote learning, you would want to contact your building principal. So if your child has chosen remote learning and wishes to come back to in-person learning, we are asking for a commitment to a minimum of 10 weeks of home learning so we can prepare for your child's arrival. There's a lot that goes into the classroom and making sure that students are safely distanced. So knowing that your child is going to return, we can provide the proper atmosphere and safety restrictions and that we need to go through CDC regulations. And I know that Mr. Turk was going to also elaborate a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, one of the questions that I would anticipate we would be getting, and again, we put our plan in place in July 31st, and then as we go, we're adding more detail to it, and it didn't provide all the information for families that we're, as an example, providing tonight and tomorrow night and Thursday night. So the question would be, if I have already made my choice, but now I want to change before the beginning of the school year, is that allowable? And what I would say is, whether you wanted to go from a home learning environment to an in-person or vice versa, that we would have you contact your child's building principal and we would talk about that. It's not an easy yes or no, because obviously there are a lot of things that we have to take into account to make that decision. So if that was your question, or if that's something that you're concerned about, please contact your child's building principal at any point. But obviously, if you are making a decision that you have an interest in changing, the sooner the better, because again, a lot of our planning is still taking place, and it'll be nice to know some of those things before we finalize those plans.
Thank you. The next question has multiple parts that center around the classroom experience. So for in-person learning, will students be in the same classroom all day? Will students be traveling from class to class, or will teachers be traveling to the groups of students? And finally, will the students be limited to a small group of peers to interact with each day?
I can answer that one, Luke.
Sorry for the triple part.
That's okay, I'll do my best. Remind me if I need to revisit one part of the question, but for in-person learning, our building schedules are currently being built in alignment with the state education department guidance, which is to minimize contact with other students throughout the school day. So we are looking at and exploring options for having things such as other teachers that may be working with a group of students come to that classroom, as opposed to students moving from class to class, from classroom to classroom physically throughout a building. So we are looking at minimizing movement of students in an elementary setting. That looks very different than a secondary setting. We're looking at cohorts staying together in an elementary setting. Our hybrid learning model accomplishes much of that in the secondary setting. So for example, in our high school, only half the students will be in the building on any given day. And even with half of the students, the administration is looking at how do we create a passing time so that we minimize student contact when they are traveling between classes. How did I do, Luke? Did I get all three parts there?
A+, you passed for today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. A similar question, what is the length of a full day of in-person instruction?
I'll take that, because that's an excellent question, and I wish I had an answer for you right now, but we don't yet. We're currently taking a look at our transportation requests and building our bus routes based on who needs a ride. That will dictate what the length of that school day will look like. We very well may need to stagger start times. Our goal, just to help alleviate some concern at home, is that we aren't that far away from being able to determine that. I know there are a lot of people that have childcare questions that are tied around when will I need to have my child in childcare, or when will I need to pick them up by at the end of the day, all sorts of different scenarios, and we're sensitive to that. And as soon as we have that information, we'll be sending it out to people. We are just as interested in getting the answer to that question as anybody that asked it. So.
Yeah, thank you. And the next question kind of surrounds that as well. Will there be before and after school programs this year? And if so, what spaces will they use?
That's a pretty common question. The easy answer is yes. We've been in contact with the YWCA. They've run our before and after school program for a number of years in both Homer Elementary and Homer Intermediate schools. We are interested in having that relationship continue. We know that's an important function to put in place for our families. We don't know yet what the spaces will be that they'll be in, but we've had a number of conversations where we're pretty comfortable with the idea that we're going to be able to come up with something. They'll have to follow the same health and safety guidelines that we have in place, and they're more than comfortable in doing that. And so, yes, we will have a before and after school program this year in both of those buildings.
Thank you much. And the questions keep rolling in, so let's just keep going. Have any decisions been made about fall sports?
I'll take that one. Thanks. So as of today, there's been no other further guidance from New York State Department of Education or Governor Cuomo on the tentative start date for September 21st. So New York State Athletics, to get ahead of COVID, decided to move the start date for JV and varsity sports from August 24th to September 21st. This is very similar to what other border states did as well to delay their sports in hopes of having them. So Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts all delayed the start of their fall sports season. We are awaiting word from New York State Department of Ed and Governor Cuomo to give us the green light for the September 21st start date. I know a big concern right now is the fact that coaches have not been able to work with our student athletes, and that was given to us, that guidance was given to us at the end of June. So it's been a long time since we've been able to work with our student athletes, and we're hoping that if there is a September 21st start date, that the state will allow us to begin slowly working with our student athletes again. But I know as of 6 o'clock today, still nothing, but something has to come out soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I'll take half of a pause here to take a deep breath and remind everyone, answers to these questions, especially the frequently asked questions, will be posted on the school district's website, homercentral.org. So once again, get to the website, click on the red banner, and as we get more information, we'll be filling it in there. So check there frequently. All right, we got a lot more questions, so we'll keep going. Next one, what is the reasoning for providing a hybrid model in grades 7 through 12, but not in the lower grades?
I'll take that. I answered some of that, I think, earlier on when I was talking about the learning models. But again, for a couple of reasons, really, we have prioritized our younger learners. And that is, one is that in our survey that we conducted in the summer, a large majority, over 78% of the people that responded told us that the most important thing is that their children needed to be in school. And they had a varied number of reasons why. One of them obviously being that they needed that sense of normalcy and routine for their child, but they also needed to go to work, which obviously that's a concern that you've heard across the country if you've been watching any national news. The other is that, as I mentioned before, the New York State guidance asked us to prioritize those students, and so that's what we went with. And I'll reiterate, we would have had all of our students every day if we could have physically fit that model, but we just didn't. And so we went to the hybrid model for grades 7 through 12.
Thank you. Next question is about school supplies. How will lists of school supplies be communicated? And are there any new restrictions or requirements due to the COVID stuff?
I'll take a shot at that. We are in the process of identifying just what the guidelines are around that. Certainly it'll have to look different than it has in the past. We have to be very careful that we're not having students share supplies this year without the ability to thoroughly disinfect them in between that sharing taking place. But as soon as we, just like with a lot of those things that we've talked about tonight so far, as soon as we have that information, we'll be sharing it with people. It'll be coming out from the building principal as it has in years past.
Thank you. Let's see, we talked about the schedules a little bit already. Will the opening of school be delayed, similar to our friendly neighbors in Cortland?
I did touch on that earlier, and the answer is that we'll phase in our students. Again, we want to prioritize those students that are new to their environment. We know that the social emotional aspect of a children's school experience is going to be much different than it has been in the past. We know that from our surveying of people and our staff that everyone dealt with this a little bit differently. So we're going to prioritize those students that we know haven't been in those spaces before and spend the first really 2-3 weeks with them, trying to help them feel comfortable in their new surroundings, establish new routines that they'll be going through for the school year so that they can meet with success.
Thank you. And people can email faster than I can read, so I apologize if we have some repeats questions here. But the next one is about physical education. What are the requirements for physical education and other specialty subjects?
That's a great question. I'll take that one. So physical education, art, music, art, and band are going to look very differently this year. Spaces are not going to be the same. Unfortunately, we will, have smaller groups. But I say, unfortunately, in the sense that this does provide us an opportunity to get out of our comfort zone and start, trying new ways to instruct and enhancing what we currently offer. For example, in physical education in the elementary school for all kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, this has given us an opportunity to create remote physical education learning kits. So their learning kit that every student in the elementary school will have has a piece of sporting good equipment that ties to our community. So it ties to Homer Rec, it ties to Portland Youth Bureau. So if there's a sport that a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old can get involved in, that piece of equipment is in that bag. So I think this gives us a great opportunity to not only enhance our current curriculum at the elementary school, but to also respond to remote learning. One of the biggest issues we had last year was not knowing what our students had at home for physical education. So it's very difficult to prescribe a curriculum when we're not sure what type of equipment a student has, because we're driven by the equipment we have in our building. So if we know what the student has, then we can provide a meaningful curriculum for that remote student, but also answer a concern in the K-2 level of sanitizing equipment. So if every student in our building in K-2 has their own baseball or softball or lacrosse stick or soccer ball or basketball, and they're not sharing that, then we know we don't have to sanitize that equipment because it's theirs. And it's also something that they can bring home with them. And I'm hoping that this will also reconnect our younger learners to the sports that are offered outside of school, and hoping that it brings our community closer together. This will allow families to that maybe didn't have a soccer ball or a basketball or lacrosse stick to start to practice with their child. But giving that equipment's the easy part. Offering the instruction is the more difficult part. So the one thing we were tasked with is making sure that we provide meaningful instructional videos to the families to make sure that that they know and their child knows how to use that piece of equipment, and creates a learner that's more confident and maybe a little more courageous to try something that they've never tried before.
Great, thanks. We'll keep going with the questions because they keep coming in. Are there concerns about having enough substitute teachers?
I'll take that. That's one of the many things I worry about on a regular basis. Yes, the answer to that is yes. There are a lot of unknowns, as you know, we've been talking about throughout our time since March. A lot of unknowns, and certainly one of the challenges will be making sure that we have enough substitute teachers for the needs that we have. We've tried to be more proactive, and we've tried to get out and advertise more for substitute teachers, knowing that that could be a difficulty. So yes, that is one of the things that we worry about, and we'll have to continue to monitor as we move forward.
Thanks. There's a couple more questions about the daily schedule, and I think we've mentioned it before, but just in case we didn't fully cover it, how will you be staggering start times, and when will we know what days of the week our students will be attending?
The easy answer to that is we've identified that for our hybrid learners, grades 7 through 12, that Monday, Tuesday cohort will be those families whose name ends in A through L of the alphabet, with just a few exceptions, and I'll get into that in a second. The Thursday, Friday cohort is M through Z. As I mentioned, the only change in that is to better balance those two groups. If you have a family with children who have different last names, if you have a learner whose name is, as an example, begins with B, and one that begins with X, we're going to have both of your children come in that second cohort, the Thursday, Friday cohort. The other part of that answer is that we don't know yet how we will stagger the beginning of the school day, as we haven't finished our transportation plan yet, but we're going to be doing that here in the very near future, and we'll communicate that as soon as we do.
Great. Similar daily schedule question. Will students be able to stay 9th period in the high school or 10th period in the junior high or something similar?
We'll have to continue to talk about that. We haven't gotten down to the specifics of that yet. We certainly know that we, again, will need to prioritize instruction. We want to create opportunities for kids to get the support that they need with the teacher that they need to be with. We haven't finalized those schedules yet.
Got it. And again, I apologize to everyone for if there's any repeated questions, but I'm just trying to keep up with all of them. So next is for the younger students. Will pre-K and kindergarten students be allowed to play with each other throughout the day?
Play will look different than it has in the past. The challenge will be to create as normal of a play time throughout the day for our youngest learners as best we can. We certainly have to keep in mind all of those social distancing and healthy hygiene practices. But our goal, as it is with transportation and the length of the school day, it's to create the most normal school experience we can. And so if there are opportunities to make it look a lot like it has in the past, we'll certainly do that.
Thanks. If a student's first day of school is a home learning day, how will they be informed of what is expected and when and where and how to start?
Great question. All of that information will be coming out from your child's building principal and the teachers that your children will have, because we are committed and we are required to have learning start on day one, which for us is Tuesday, September the 8th. But more details will be coming from the building on exactly what we'll be asking our children to participate in.
Moving along, any new changes with student teachers? Protocols, will we have them? Anything different there?
We have in Homer over the course of certainly the 21 years that I've been here, we've prioritized, and we see that as part of our mission to help those students that are interested in becoming teachers to get that experience with us, and we will continue that. We're in process of talking to the college about what that looks like, so that we can again do to the best of our ability, make it a safe situation for both the student teacher and for all the adults and the students that person would come in contact with. But we are committed to continuing a relationship and allowing student teachers to work with our children.
Thank you. Next is another BOCES question. Are BOCES career programs offered virtually as opposed to in person?
That answer changes, to be quite honest. It changes, and I'll have to gather that information, because I know at one point they were talking about a virtual experience. I believe they've come down with it's going to be in person, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'd rather get the answer correct. So what I can do is do some research, and we can provide that in the frequently asked question document.
Sounds good. Next is about teacher opportunities. Will Homer be providing teachers with time to prepare for both online and in-person learning? I assume that's staff development days and such.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to answer that, Luke. We've actually begun working with many of our teacher teams to identify what those needs are. Our staff submitted a survey to us probably about 2 weeks ago now, and I just shared with them a few hours ago that over the course of the next 2 weeks, we're going to be offering paid opportunities for our teachers to come actually to participate in a virtual training that will be centered around meeting the needs of learners that are distance learning, right? So that home learning model. in looking at some significant factors about how we build relationships across home learning and how we engage students. In addition, as Superintendent Turk has mentioned, we also will have 2 staff development days prior to September 8th. So the staff will be coming here in person September 2nd and September 3rd. And we have communicated to the staff that that time will be dedicated to do the work that's necessary for us to prepare for students to arrive on the 8th.
Thank you. Another home learning question. Will home learners be provided with hard copies of the learning materials so they can complete work off screen? I think you mentioned some of that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's difficult to answer in a blanket statement like that. It would really be a case-by-case basis. What we have begun talking about is, you know, what are the things that we will need to be providing home learners? Everything from the, as you heard Mr. Lisi talk about the equipment for physical education. We've talked about the equipment for art and what a student would need at home in order to participate in their art education. Likewise, for our classroom instruction. We have some difficult conversations ahead to look at what science experiments look like at home, but the state has also authorized us at the high school level to do more virtual labs. So really that's going to be driven by the conversations that we have within our instructional teams in the district and really be determined on a case-by-case basis. What I would share with parents is at any point, if you feel that there's materials that your child needs to be successful in school, to open that line of communication with the parents and advocate for your child.
Luke, I would also add that we are additionally looking at that for our students with disabilities who may have related services that may be unable to be here, that would be participating remotely. Something we've recognized from our time this spring is, you know, similar to what I think Mr. Finn was saying with not having the ability to certainly put some things in students' hands as they were going out the door so quickly. We're looking to be more proactive this year and have some things available, similar to what Mr. Lisi's talking about with physical education for those students who may not be able to attend in person.
Thanks. Next question. Should in-person instruction resume for all children at some point during the academic year? Would my child's teacher remain the same, or would we have to shuffle the classrooms?
That's a great question, and as Ted mentioned, it's hard to make a blanket statement about that. We certainly might find ourselves in a situation where that would continue. I'm optimistic that we would be able to figure it out and keep in mind how important it would be to maintain some level of continuity for our children, but it's hard to answer that question right now. I hope we have that problem, quite honestly. I hope that we have an opportunity to have all of our children here every day, and we certainly, as we begin to tackle that, if that does come to fruition, we'll be in contact with families to talk about our process for doing that and ask for your help in helping us to do that.
Okay. Getting a lot of questions now relating to health and safety type items, which I'll remind everyone, please tune in for the forums both tomorrow and the next night to pick up health and safety information as well as transportation and food service information. But we do have a couple of more questions here. So people looking for more information on students that need more guidance or more time with the teacher, specifically to honors classes and AP courses. That might tie in with the 9th period, 10th period thing a little bit as well.
It does, but I would also encourage people to, just like we would always do, contact your child's teacher. I know from talking with our staff, they're very interested in doing the right thing and meeting the needs of all of the children, whether they be in the classroom with them every day or 2 days a week or not at all. And I would always encourage people to reach out to that teacher. Certainly, if you do that and you don't either get the answer that you were hoping for or you're not responded to at all, you would want to contact the building principal. But I would always encourage you to be an advocate for your child. We can only do well by your child if we know what your child really needs. And sometimes that requires you to make contact to let us know about that.
Thanks. Any updates to give on students receiving specialty services such as speech therapy, physical therapy, things like that?
Sure. We've been meeting in each of those departments as well as kind of cross department to talk about what things went well, what things were challenges for us in the spring. And so we have looked at a variety of different options for how we may be able to provide services in a different modality this year. We have purchased a few different online portals that will allow us to create some individualized plans as well as share some resources. We have also looked at incorporating and purchasing additional physical materials for students that they may be able to utilize while they're here, as well as should the time arise that they may end up in a remote learning opportunity. So we have been having those discussions, and our goal is to design services for those students in a capacity that would lend to whether they were here or whether they should be home, us being able to provide them access and opportunities for growth.
Thanks. A few more. Will parents be able to walk their young students to their classroom on the first day of school?
That's an excellent question, and unfortunately, given the state of where we are, we will not be able to accommodate that. What we're going to try to do is make it as welcoming as we can to allow for some, not necessarily physical contact, but contact between the child, the parent, and the teacher on that opening day. But we have to follow the social distancing guidelines and all of those things as we open our school year. But again, as I mentioned when someone asked the question about what play will look like, our goal is to try to create a welcoming environment, keep it as normal as we can, and if people have ideas about what that might look like, we would love to hear from you about those, because again, while we have a lot of expertise here in the district, we certainly don't have all the answers, and we'll build a better plan with the more people that we have giving input. So if you have some ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Great. They're still coming in fast and furious, so if you folks are okay, I'll just keep shooting them at you. We mentioned physical education, a gym class earlier. Do we have anything to add about other specialty courses, art, music, library, for both in-person or for home learning?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to address it, at least from a general overview. I don't have as many specifics to share as Mr. Lisi shared about that K2 physical education program, but we've been meeting with our special area teachers, and one of the things that we've made clear from the beginning here in Homer is our commitment to ensuring that all students have access to meeting all grade level standards and all content standards. And what that means is, we won't be eliminating music or art or PE or library, but what I've, challenged the teachers that work in those different areas to begin thinking about is, what are the most effective ways that we can help students achieve those standards in ways that we might not have thought before. For example, similar to PE, there's some restrictions in the state guidance around music and wind instruments and singing, which our children tend to do a lot, right, in music class, singing and dancing and moving, are going to be restricted because there's an additional boundaries in addition to social distancing that the state has given a 12-foot guidance. So given that, we've begun talking about, we still have the same goals for our students, the same learning goals. When I talked with the staff earlier, one of the key questions they asked was, what is success going to look like this year? And I was very clear in that success this year actually looks like every other year. And that is, all students need 1 year of growth for 1 year input. And so we're looking at, there will be different activities, different ways. We actually have some amazing creative teachers here in Homer, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the ways that they help our children achieve those standards.
Great, thank you. So the next one, how do you plan on taking daily attendance for online learners?
That's a great question, and we've had a number of conversations and continue. We shared information with staff today, and again, it's a work in progress. We don't have a one size fits all, but one thing we do know is that we're required to do so. And so we'll put a model in place and communicate that to families when we have it, that allows us to do that, because that is, we don't often have to deal with non-negotiables, but that is one of them. And so we will figure it out and communicate it to people as quickly as we can.
Thanks. A similar question for hybrid and online learning. Can there be a set schedule where students can connect with their teachers daily, maybe similar to having periods if they're in here in school, just so those connections are standard and routine?
And I'll start, Ted, and then you can add if you want to. One of the things that we know we can improve on is the amount of daily contact. Another thing that we heard from our families when they filled out our survey was that they really felt it was important that their child had a schedule. Now, how rigid that schedule is, does that mean that the child gets up and is in front of their Chromebook at the beginning of first period all the way through eighth period? That might not mean that, but they're going to be on a much more of a scheduled expectation than they were from March to June. One of the questions, and I don't know if you've received it, but I've heard it out in the community, is we have some of our students that last spring, and they're industrious, they wanted to get a job and they wanted to work. And they did that and did their work around their schoolwork. That is not something that we're going to be encouraging this fall, because again, as far as we know, this is going to be a longer term model that we're putting in place right now. And so we're going to expect our students to be students first, and then any kind of job, we would expect them to get a job much like they did when we were here in person every day.
So I don't have to worry about my kid getting a job?
No. No. Would you add anything to that,
Yeah,
Ted?
you know, the only thing I would add, and I appreciate, you know, your description, Superintendent Turk, is, you know, as we were talking about, you know, the special areas and how we help children reach those standards, it's going to look differently. And so one of the conversations that we're currently having with our instructional staff is, what is the value of that real-time interaction? When is it effective to help student learning? And then what is the value for that asynchronous or that kind of at their own time activities, right? So be that an instructional video that's created by the teacher, or it could be even independent practice or assessment that the student is being asked to do maybe in their Google Classroom, right? And so we're thinking long and hard about, we still have the same instructional objectives, the same learning standards. What are the various tools that we have at our disposal to help children achieve that? And so we're looking at having a mix of those two and taking advantage of every opportunity we have to help children achieve.
Thank you. This one might be a little specific as well. How many students do we expect in each elementary class?
That is a very good question. The answer is it depends on the size of the room. We are not blessed with an elementary school with large classrooms. And so that was one of the challenges when we tried to house kindergarten, first grade, and second grade at the elementary school. Some of our rooms, we can have 7 students in them based upon social distancing guidelines. The largest that we're able to have in any one room, 12 or 13, depending upon the room. And there aren't many of those spaces. Most of our rooms are under 10. And so it really limits what we can do. So it varies depending upon the size.
This one's fun to think about in the summer. Will snow days be home learning days for everyone?
I love that question. I love that question. And I have jokingly shared my answer to that question with some of our staff. Again, I think the easy answer is we don't know yet. Certainly having more of an online or a home learning expectation gives us some options there, but I'm not ready to say that we'll never have snow days again, but we certainly have more to consider now than we did, say, 6-7 months ago.
Thank you. Question about state tests. Will state tests and or regents be offered or required at the end of the year?
Yeah, and I'll answer that one, Lou. At this time, the State Education Department has informed us that they will be having all New York State testing go on as scheduled. Many questions remain in the field about how we would be directed to conduct that test for our home learners. But at this time, the New York State ELA and math testing program for grades 3 through 8, the science tests in grade 4 and 8, and the New York State Regents in January and June are, the current guidance from the State Education Department is that students will be expected to take those exams. And at any time, if we receive further guidance about what that will look like or exemptions, we would be communicating that to our families.
Great. I've got a bunch more. Anybody need a water break or anything? Okay? All right. I think we mentioned it before, but there's a few questions still about students going to a new building, being able to tour that building, become familiar with it. Can you just mention that again?
That'll be what our focus is when we phase those students in that first week. The goal will be to acclimate them to that building to the best of our ability, so that they see the spaces that they'll be spending their day in. They'll understand what parts of the building they'll be traveling to, and understand what our expectations are as far as social distancing and hallways and all those traffic patterns and all those kinds of things. But there won't be a standalone walk through as we've done in the past. It's just too difficult for us to control that and make sure that we're adhering to the guidelines.
Okay, a general question. What is the best way for families to communicate with their teachers? Is there an app for that?
I'll be happy to jump in on this one. Actually, beginning last year, the district underwent a long-term strategic planning process, and part of that strategic planning process created several subgroups, and a subgroup that Mr. Turk and I sit on is the Community Engagement Subcommittee. And after, and I'm sure as the folks at home know, there's plenty of work to do in that vein, and that's why it was identified as an important area. But after the events in the spring, it was very clear that we needed a better mechanism to communicate from the district to parents, from the building to parents, and from the teacher to parents. And we really identified that as a committee as something that was important. Through several committee meetings and a lot of evaluations and discussions and stakeholder input, the district has actually landed on a solution. We are in the process as we speak. I actually had a call yesterday afternoon and spinning up this new solution. It's called Parent Square. It allows parents to engage with all of those folks that try to communicate from the school level, like I said, at the district level, like Mr. Turk or Mr. Love, building principals, all the way to the not only the teachers, but maybe teachers of specials or athletic coaches or club supervisors. It will allow those individuals to engage with parents in a more flexible way. The parents will be able to choose whether they prefer to get telephone calls or texts or emails, or to use an app that it will be customized to them that also integrates our calendars and the calendars for all of those different activities. We're really excited about the prospects of this communication. We've made it an option for teachers to jump on board. We recognize that teachers will have a lot of things that they're trying to adopt at the beginning of school, so we made it optional for them, pending a little bit more support in the as far as professional development. But we as a district have made the commitment to ourselves that that's the platform that we're going to begin to use at the beginning of school, at the district and building level. So yeah, this is probably the first time that it's been announced publicly, but it's something that we're working on really hard, and I'm confident that we're going to be ready for when school starts. And I'm also confident that parents are going to see an improvement in the way that we're able to engage with them.
Thanks. Once again, there are a lot of questions about health and safety, a lot of questions about transportation and food service, and if everyone can tune in each night this week, that will be fantastic. We can cover those areas as well. But we'll get through the other instructional questions here tonight as long as they keep coming in. One is asking about grading. In the spring, grading was unusual. Are there any changes there? Will grading be different for high school students versus elementary students? And speak to that kind of thing if you could.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to address that. We've actually begun that dialogue here in the district. The same concern has been raised by our staff about having reasonable expectations to help all students achieve and to be able to communicate that guidance clearly from the beginning. So we will be scheduling several meetings between now and the beginning of school to bring some of our stakeholders into that process and provide us feedback. One of the questions I think that we'll be looking at, it will look different than the spring. It may not look identical to what it did last fall. So one of the key questions as we look at our grading policies is, how are we going to be effectively able to communicate with parents, to give parents feedback about their child's learning in school and fit the various modalities, right? The various learning models that we have in place. So our grading policy will need to be aligned with the various models that we have, whether a student is learning at home, a student is learning in a hybrid option 7-12, or a student is here in person even 5 days a week. So we'll be considering all of that the week of August 31st, and I expect that, one of our goals as a district is that we would like to have some consistency between subjects, some consistency between our school buildings about how we approach grading, and I anticipate that we will arrive at least some preliminary decisions that week before school and be able to share that with parents that opening week.
Thank you, and I'll remind everyone that's tuned in tonight, we're gonna try to go for another 15 minutes or so with the instructional questions. All these questions and answers will be posted to the district website through the frequently asked questions section. So we'll get through the ones that we have, and then we'll post the answers to any that we might not get to on time. So this is not within our area of expertise, but has anyone heard if they're gonna have SAT tests anytime soon?
I actually did hear that there are SAT tests being offered this fall, but I'm unable to speak about the specifics at this time.
And I'm glad the next question doesn't pertain to my home office, but will students have a dress code when they are learning at home?
Well, that falls under the category, we'll have to address that when we come to it. Certainly, if they're going to be taking part in a class at the same time that other students can view them, yes, we will certainly want them to be appropriate. Whether or not we'll get down to the specifics of the dress code, we'll have to determine that. But we certainly want to make sure that anyone that's visible is school appropriate.
Okay, another question about the hybrid model, probably too specific to get into very much, but are teachers going to be live streaming their classes as part of a hybrid model, or will that be something different?
Yeah, and that's getting really to the nuts and bolts, as our committee last week really identified those nuts and bolts questions. And so, as we look at it, I don't foresee us asking a student to tune in to a live stream 40-minute lecture, 8 periods in a row. I don't think that is the best use of the students' time while they're at school, and I don't think it's the most effective learning model. I think where we're going to end up is some combination of perhaps some live streamed events. As I mentioned earlier in this webcast, we may be looking at having students joining in for, at the elementary school, could be joining in for morning meeting or joining in for a class conversation. At an upper level, it could be joining in for the class to have a debate. It could be even having a student at home partnered up with a student who's here in school as learning partners. We're looking at leveraging every instructional strategy we have. I'm not convinced that live streaming an entire 40-minute class is the most effective. So I think we're also going to be exploring ways to allow that student to be working on instructional materials that the teachers have posted to their Google Classroom or to the Seesaw app that we're going to be using for our K-1 learners, and to be really digging in at that point. So I think it's not specifically, Luke, at this point, that we can say exactly what that, percentage of time will be, but we're looking at taking advantage of both modalities of learning to help our students.
Thank you very much. I see a lot of people weren't able to get here right at the beginning of the town hall tonight, so we'll remind everyone that these meetings are being recorded. They'll be available on the district's Facebook page, the web page, and the YouTube channel. If you want to be highly entertained, you can go back through and watch the beginning of our meeting as well. A question about classroom space. Weather permitting, will teachers be allowed to teach outside?
While we won't have any dedicated outdoor spaces just because of the unpredictability with weather in this beautiful part of the world that we live in, we certainly would welcome teachers who have the opportunity to take their children outdoors and to socially distance and to use the outside as a learning environment.
Excellent. The next question is regarding books. Will students be able to bring their books home, or are there COVID requirements surrounding that?
Yeah, and I would address again, it's going to depend on the subject and the classroom teacher, but what I can share with parents is a number of teachers in the district have been working with my office to procure ebooks to procure licensing. Many of our textbook publishers have already moved to licensing where we have electronic versions of those books already. And in many cases where we've purchased textbooks in the past 3 years, we've actually only purchased enough physical books for students to use as references when they're here, but we've purchased enough ebook licenses for every student to have a copy. So, it's going to depend on the condition of the textbooks, whether we have enough for one for every student or not, as well as what other resources teachers are going to use to offer students an opportunity to dig in deeper on that subject and to do their homework.
Thanks. On a similar topic with the home learning regarding school laptops, Chromebooks and such, if a student's hardware needs to be replaced or repaired or updated, what should parents do and who should they contact?
I'll obviously take that question. I think we've during the spring, there's a lot of opportunities for growth, and I think we did a good job working our way through that. The current process as it exists is we have a phone number. Folks, if they have an issue, can simply call, leave a voicemail. That voicemail goes directly to the technology team. We've committed to, if the call's before 2 o'clock, that we're going to get a hold of you that day. We're going to get a hold of you and find out exactly what it is that we need to do to make you whole. Some things we can actually do remotely, and because of the reality of COVID, the tools that are available to us have improved as well. So we'll be able to do a little bit more remote diagnostics than we used to be able to. In addition to using the phone and calling, we also have a web form right on our website that'll continue, and the same deal applies. As soon as that comes in, a tech will get a hold of the individual, and we'll do our best to solve that problem. In the fall, what had happened, or the spring rather, what had happened several times is a piece of equipment failed. For folks who are strictly home learning model, then we would work on an exchange through the main office. Folks who are hybrid, if they're a Monday, Tuesday, if the thing dies on a Friday, if it's early enough, we can do the swap that day. If not, they'll be in school on Monday and we can do that swap.
Very good. Well, I bet I can guess where this next question came from. Will senior privileges be allowed?
That will be an excellent question for the high school principal. We haven't had a lot of conversations about that yet, but I'll go back to that default answer that I've been giving. Our goal is to try to make the school year as normal as we can, given where we find ourselves with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll be having conversations with students and staff about those things. We'll do what we can and still keep people safe.
Thanks. And staying in the high school, this may have been answered already while I was frantically reading, but will high school students switch classrooms in between periods, or will the teachers rotate, or do we have those answers yet?
They're in the process of putting their schedule together now. While again, we are building every building schedule, trying to minimize movement. There will be some movement at the secondary level, just because the groups of students don't stay the same. They're not going from one class to another with the same group of students. So it presents more of a challenge, but certainly taking a look at our building schedule to accommodate as many of those guidelines and good practices that we can. We're in the process of doing that now.
Okay, and I think it's just one final question that we haven't been through yet on the instructional front. How are the PE learning kits being stored? Are they stored all together or separated?
So the PE learning kits, if you are going to be learning remotely, there will be set dates. I'll be releasing that information. I have to work with Mr. Pasquarella at the elementary school to have pickup dates for the remote learning kits for our remote learners. For our in-person learners, when you're coming into the classroom, those will either be stored in the classroom if it fits, or we're going to have to find another location in the building. That's kind of a work in progress. The idea behind the remote learning kits was to obviously answer a couple concerns. Is if we have to go fully remote, we'll know exactly what our K1 and 2 learners have at home, but also to to recognize that we can't keep sanitizing equipment over and over, during a short amount of time, and also that the class sizes are going to be much smaller, and where we're going to be teaching those classes could be different. So the storage, I'm hopeful that we might be able to keep them in the classroom if it doesn't impede into what the teachers' setup is. But the kit it really doesn't take up a lot of space. So if we can, the classroom, if not, we'll find a better location.
Thanks, and I'll use the moderator's privilege to ask one more question anyways. Should students bring their Chromebook with them on the first day?
We'll have to provide more information on that. Quite honestly, we haven't had that discussion yet. But any information, we certainly want to have kids prepared, our children prepared when they come back. If that's necessary, we'll clearly communicate that at the levels that we're having that expectation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to the panel again. We'll wrap this up on the instructional front. Remind everyone that tomorrow's session will be on health and safety, and Thursday's session will focus on transportation and food service. And Superintendent Turk, any last thoughts?
First of all, I want to thank people that took the time to tune in and watch, and certainly for asking your questions. I'm a firm believer that the more minds that we put towards something, the better the product will be. Your questions, the ones that we haven't been able to answer, are those that we can consider and find answers to. But one thing I think that is important for me to say, and I hope that you can do it, and that is keep in mind that this is an evolving document. Just like the pandemic itself is evolving, the guidance is evolving, our plan will evolve, but fundamentally our goal in building this plan is to create the safest and richest learning environment for your children and to make it as welcoming as we can. So if you ever have any questions or any thoughts about what we're doing, please feel free to reach out and contact us, and someone will be in touch. Because again, we'll build a better plan together. And again, to reiterate what Luke was saying, please make sure that you tune in tomorrow night and Thursday night. We'll do our best to share the most up-to-date information and answer some of the questions that you have.
Thanks to everybody. Much appreciated.